Hi everyone, and welcome to my presentation. Today I will be sharing about writing and English language learners, specifically writing voice. This was for my graduate research project. First, I have a table of contents on this slide here. Each of those links will take you to the specific points of the presentation, and anytime this icon shows up on each of the slides in the presentation, so whether it's purple or a different color, that is actually a link that will take you back to the table of contents. First, my introduction. So my inspiration for this project was first because I'm an E&L teacher, so I work with EL students in a rural public New York State school. And last summer I had the opportunity to attend a workshop on 6+1 traits of writing, and found these traits to be very applicable and useful, and I was excited to use them, especially as my students definitely struggle with writing based on things I've observed and their assessment scores. So my research question for my thesis project was, does a writing voice intervention using the 6+1 framework significantly increase the writing voice performance of 5th to 6th grade English language learners? As I was preparing for my own research, I did some research looking at some other literature and found, evidence that writing is a powerful influencing tool and an important skill, but it's a struggle for a lot of students, especially ELs. There have been a lot of successful 6+1 writing traits and writing workshop studies, and writing voice is important because it allows for that connection with the audience and lets the reader really know what the writer wants to say. And also that ELs benefit from lots of writing time, choice, and feedback, which are some of those important writing workshop elements. And this visual over here, I was kind of going for writing and voice with the speech bubble, so that's kind of the story there. My context theory, so my theory was based on the 6+1 traits of writing model, which is a form of analytic assessment, a method of looking at the main characteristics of writing and assessing them independent from one another. So looking at all those different pieces. Additionally, this model works. It helps students grow as writers, and it supports students as they learn to think, reason, and communicate using writing as a means to discover what matters. And then the bubble on the side there just kind of points out that writing voice is the soul of the piece, and it's what makes the writer's style singular as his or her convictions come out through the words. So I really was excited to dig into writing voice a little more. My goals with my research was to address some of the gap in the literature. So there's a lack of research on effective literacy interventions for Latino ELs, and it's also hard to find 6+1 traits of writing studies with ELs. So I set out to build a writing workshop intervention using the 6+1 traits and use that with Latino ELs. My hypothesis for my study was that students' performance in writing voice would improve following a targeted small group intervention around writing voice. Thus, student scores based on the writing voice rubric would increase from their pre-test score to their post-test score. Moving to my methodology. So again, the icon here will take you to the table of contents. So now I'll go back to methodology. Okay, so my methodology mostly built around my interventions. So first I used pre-experimental design, which is when a researcher studies one group using an intervention and there's not a control group. So I had kind of a pre-test, post-test setup with mine with one group of 5 male 5th to 6th grade English language learners and I delivered this writing voice intervention in person during our after-school program. Some basics about my intervention. So it was 10 sessions over 7 weeks, and I used explicit instruction, modeling, and repeated practice, some of those 6+1 elements. I worked to provide ongoing structured chances to develop writing and use the gradual release responsibility model, which some folks might know as the I do, we do, you do model. I found it very effective with my students. I used a lot of relevant, fun picture books, such as those pictured on the side, connected videos, and diverse examples as possible. The general outline of each of our sessions was started with reviewing the norms and learning objectives, which are there on the side. Then we would read a text, discuss writing voice in that text, then do some voice activity related to the text using a lot of modeling and the gradual release responsibility. Then we'd share our examples, discuss feedback and growth, and then kind of discuss like how are we doing with writing voice, how are we making progress. So feel free to pause the video if you would like to check that slide out a little more. And this is a sample, a 2-week or 2-session sample from my unit plan, including the materials and the text. So feel free to pause, check that out if you would like. And then this is an example of, these are examples of some of the student work. So these are templates I created based on those texts. Feel free to pause and check those out also if you would like. For my data collection, so I started with giving the prompt A, which you can see on the side there, the question that I used, and then myself and 2 colleagues scored each student using the writing voice rubric. Then I averaged those 3 scores to give students their prompt A score. Then we did the intervention, and then I gave prompt B, which is basically the same as the pretest. So that was prompt B was the post-test, and then we scored and averaged again. Then I did a paired sample t-test looking at prompts A and B to compare the scores, and then analyze those results to assess any changes in scores, and we'll discuss the analysis soon. Next. So my findings. So this is the handout. There will be, my plan is to put the link to the PDF of this document in the video description. So we've kind of gone through the summary and the context in New York, my research question, and the findings and implications we will be getting to next. Just a reminder of my research question there. Does the writing voice intervention increase the writing voice performance of 5th, 6th grade Ls? So these are my results. So for prompt A, the mean score of all 5 students was 1.47 out of 5, and it was 2 out of 5 for prompt B. You can see the standard deviation was much smaller for prompt A, so the scores were all pretty close. Well, we're all closer to the same score, but then prompt B, the standard deviation was bigger, so the scores were more spread out, and the highest score for prompt B was actually 3.33 out of 5, which is pretty great. The P number here, so the significance of the t-test comparing prompt A and prompt B is very low, so that's not actually any sort of statistical significance, but there was a slight increase even if it's not statistically significant. So that's kind of the basics of the data. So the gist of those results were that students' scores went up overall from the pre to the post test, showing that targeted small group interventions with opportunities for lots of practice may help L students improve their writing voice. So then to kind of dig into those findings a little more with kind of implications and conclusions, and again, this icon will take you back to the table of contents if you would like. So first, student scores increased from 1.47 to 2 out of 5, which isn't statistically significant, but that result still supports my hypothesis stating that participants' writing voice performance would improve following a targeted writing voice intervention. So even if it wasn't statistically significant, it was still an increase, which is cool. This success follows with other studies that found success using writing workshop and 6+1 traits elements. And I was able to address a specific need that my students had, and their improvement in writing voice may have been assisted with the fact that we had a small intervention group, so they were kind of able to really get what they needed. There were some errors and a lot of methodological difficulties and limitations in my study. So because I only had 5 students, 5 participants, the results were volatile, and some calculations are likely skewed because of the small sample size. There were definitely some limitations to my intervention delivery. So it was, most of our lessons were at about 3:30 in the afternoon, and that's a pretty hard time for kiddos, especially low achievers that have difficulty focusing for extended periods. And the students I was working with were definitely, well, at least some of them were low achievers. So that was a limitation. It was given in close proximity to the ELA state exam for New York. So the students were kind of burnt out and not really interested in another writing assignment or another writing activity. Our environment in the after school program, we did share space a little bit, so there were distractions occasionally. So that was difficult. And in general, my study results can't be generalized to any kind of population, but my study could serve as a pilot study. So just a brief reminder. So the gap that I was looking to address was that lack of research on literacy interventions for Latino ELs. And I was able to speak to that gap a little bit, at least. I have a successful writing workshop, literacy intervention with Latino ELs. I did 6+1 traits of writing research with ELs, and I helped them improve their writing voice, so have these strategies. I was able to add to the field of literacy research, not with significant results, but possibly something that could serve as a pilot study. So where do we go from here? There's a lot of future research opportunities, first and foremost, using a larger sample size with the same lesson materials and assessments, so that we could test the validity and reliability of my instruments and results, and kind of just have that opportunity to do the study with a lot more participants. One possibility would be to have 2 comparison groups, so one group of ELs and one group of monolingual English speakers, and then compare the impact of the intervention on the different groups based on their language status. Or a different comparison option would be to have an experimental group that receives the intervention and a control group that does not receive that intervention, but give both groups the post-test and pre-test, or pre-test and post-test, and then compare the results of those assessments. And then implications for future practice. So include for teachers trying to build those interventions around students' needs and provide modeling and examples and work with small groups and use that I do, we do, you do model. Administrators working to provide professional development opportunities around small group interventions and teaching assessment and data analysis and how to use that assessment to inform instruction. Teacher educators providing pre-service teachers with strategies for research and for teaching writing to ELs and using data and instruction, I think are all some important pieces to take away from kind of what I've shared here. And then an overall takeaway is kind of the goal of providing targeted instruction based on students' needs, encouraging lots of practice, especially with writing, and then meeting students where they are to improve writing skills from there. Students deserve the best. And my acknowledgements, I have a lot of people to thank who helped me with this project. So my fantastic ENL teacher colleagues served as graders and scorers for for the prompts A and B. My school staff developer who first introduced me to the 6+1 traits of writing and provided instruction on that. My students, my wonderful ENL students who were my participants, and then my school, my participants' parents, and the after-school program leaders and colleagues. Thank you so much for your full support in making this project happen. My on-site mentor at school who supported and encouraged and guided me through this project, and then my master's program professors at Houghton. I would have been so lost without you, so thank you so much. And also thank you to my audience. Thank you so much for engaging in this presentation, and I would be happy to respond to questions and comments about what I've shared today. So feel free to reach out via email, and my information is included on the final slide, which is my bio slide. And finally, thank you to the educational community for providing great resources to jumpstart this project and opportunities to become a lifelong learner while seeking the best for my students. These are the resources that I used specifically in this presentation. So feel free to pause if you would like to check any of those out. And there's another slide of them. So then this last slide is specifically the picture books and the images that I used in this presentation, and I hope to have the video linked in the slides, and then the slides uploaded also in the video description. Finally, this is my bio slide, so feel free to check that out and send me emails if you have questions or comments. I would love to dialogue with you on that, and thank you so much for your time and for watching. Have a great day.